Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Michael Tierney, and this is Chicago Artist Circle. Joining me at Half Acre Brewing in Chicago's Bowmanville neighborhood are 6 of the most brilliant, generous, dynamic, and respected actors in this city. Welcome, gentlemen. So happy to have you here. We're just going to get right into it. What's at the forefront of my mind is this is such a strong non-equity community, and I know I'm sitting with, including myself, equity artists. So what I'm curious about is each of your individual journeys from non-equity to equity. Mark, I know specifically what is your position of power with equity? You have your
none, virtually. Power, yes. I'm an elected. I'm a member of the Central Regional Board of Actors Equity, and in the realm of our union, we're a specialized union, but we work like so many other unions do. We have electeds who hours of our unpaid time behind tables and on Zooms and negotiating contracts, which how I came into it was how I came into equity as a member, and that's when I realized. I will say that I got my card about 6 months after I graduated, and this is in the mid 80s. What happened was I was a non-union understudy, and I was covering for an actor who went away to do a job for just under 2 weeks, because here's some union stuff. The rule is, as a non-union understudy in a union show, you can play just shy of 2 weeks and still retain your non-union status. Mm-hmm. You know, and but once you play 2 weeks, you get your card. Or, as these producers wanted me to do, what ended up happening was this guy didn't come back from a month-long stint away, scabbing, doing non-union work. It gets richer. Anyway, I had a bunch of really great big brothers and sisters in that company who are still friends of mine. Sean Grennan, Kathy Santon, Liz Pazik, Richard Hensel. All these people were kind of in this company with me. And when they came to them and said, okay, so-and-so is not coming back, so Mark's going to go on and we're not going to tell anybody. And the deputy, who I found out who the deputy was at the time, said, oh no, we're not doing that. No, Mark's either not going to go on if he doesn't want to become union, and we'll figure something else out. It's one show. Stage manager will go on and we'll figure something out. Or Mark will go on and get his card. And he looked right at me and said, and I think it's time for you to get your card. I got sort of the wheels turning of what equity can do for you and what equity means to you. A few years later, I had a question about a CAT contract, a Chicago Area Theaters contract. I actually had a complaint about the way producers were treating actors. And I found myself 2 months later behind the negotiation table for the CAT contract because I had opened my mouth. And I thought, oh, there's these positions where you can talk about it. And there's committees. There's a CAT committee. There's a stage managers committee. There's an equal employment opportunity committee, of which I'm very active on. You know, we talk about all kinds of issues. We talk about ageism. We talk about LGBTQ issues. We talk about all of it. And I thought, oh my gosh, my union does this? This is amazing. Yeah. So that's my long story of how I honestly did not. I won't say that I looked back. I never looked back. I've looked at things differently. I maybe looked sideways, you know, but I've not. I knew that it was the right thing for me to do because and I knew it was going to grow and change. I wasn't going to be somebody. I knew already I wasn't going to be somebody that somebody else was going to tell me that I had to be. I guess. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Did anyone else have a moment where they turned, or you were uncertain about turning?
When I went equity in '88, I was doing a show. I was a member of Stage Left Theater, and it's in one of its original incarnations. And I went to audition for Tacunda by Charles Smith at Victory Gardens, and I was auditioned as a replacement. It was a student tour. Mm-hmm. And I was in the room with the guy that was director, was the guy from the Guthrie in Minneapolis who was in. And in the middle of the audition, Dennis Sacha came in. And he was like, "You have a monologue you can do for me?" And he kept asking the question, "Can you do another one? Can you do another one?" So I did 5 monologues. One of the last two were like Shakespeare, and I was like, "Okay." And then it did some more reading, did some more sides from the script. And he came out in the lobby after I was released and said, "Okay, here's the thing. We want to cast you in the show, but you have to go equity." I had done 5 shows. And, I was and most of them were one was a Famous Story, and the rest of them were at Stage Left. So I didn't really have a lot of exposure around the city and that sort of thing. But it's the same thing you're talking about, Marcus. I wanted to be a professional actor and not have to wait tables for the rest of my life in order to do free theater at night. And so it was really important to my father that I was, a member of a union, and all of a sudden I had like benefits and all those sorts of things that you had to earn. But I was working, and I went. In 1990, I started going out of town. I was out of town doing regional theater, which we just talked about, for years. And so I still didn't have a footprint in the city for a long time until after Victory Gardens. I did 3 shows there, and then I went out of town for like 4 or 5 years. But it's the same kind of thing. I never looked back. It was one of those things. I wasn't really concerned about the work, but I thought if somebody's asking me to join the union and I have this opportunity now, then let's see what happens. You know what I mean? And it opened up a world opportunity for me because I didn't just look in the city, but I loved it. I'm glad I did it when I did, and I'm glad that I feel like there were people, even from my own company, it's like, you're not going to work very much. It's like a lot of people go, you should wait, take more time, get more credits, and all that sort of stuff. And because she said that, I was like, I just don't think that's good advice.
Kareem, what was your journey into equity?
Nothing so illustrious. I was eligible to join maybe 3-4 years before I actually did, thinking that, I'm new here and I want to get to know people, and I've heard that story now many times. And a friend of mine set me up with a job in Pittsburgh, and I told the artistic director there that I was going to, look, I'm going to be equity for this because I think it's time. And he said, I don't want to pay the health care. And I'm like, okay, I got no kids. I'm, young. Give me this much extra. I won't tell you how much that was, but this much extra per week, and I'll forego turning. And then I got stuck in the basement of this couple in Shadyside. And down there in that basement, I got a bad ear infection, an eye infection, a bite because this is the first time I encountered those 1,000-leggers.
Yeah. Right. Right.
A big old something over here that developed.
Where were you staying again? Can you say that again?
In Shadyside in Pittsburgh, which is a very sort of like posh area of Pittsburgh, just up from Oakland. And so after that experience, and one weekend they were like, you have to leave because my granddaughter is coming and they're going to use the basement and we don't want you around. So I had to figure that out. Thankfully, Alan Gilmore was on the same contract and let me stay at his place. So when I came back from that, I was pretty determined that I was going to join so that nobody could do that to me again, And even then, I will say that by some local theaters, there was sort of a plan afoot to I don't mean like en masse, but like with one particular theater to like keep me from turning because they needed me to be in a show as a non-equity actor. And some of the rhetoric that was used is like, well, what if you don't work again? And I was kind of like, I'll take my chances.
That's it. That's right.
This is my career, thank you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And since then, it's been pretty much, it's been very, very good to me. And one thing I will say is that it allows me to do the thing as a career, like as my full-time kind of thing. Yeah. But the one thing I miss about and when I see some non-equity actors who are pretty freaking amazing do their thing is like, well, now for them, it's not that it's not a labor of love for me always, but for them, it's purely a labor of love, right? They have this job that can support them financially, and I have, from that moment onward, place the pressure of finances on the thing that I love to do, which is like a mixed bag.
It's a problem. It is.
So,
It's a fine line.
well, my journey into equity was very similar to actually my journey into this thing professionally. Anyway, I feel that I was always a performer. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. The area that I grew up was not very good, so my mother put us in Catholic schools, which had great theater programs. So, kindergarten, I remember my first show, I was a priest, and, so I've been doing it. I was, my grandfather was a pastor, I was a musician at his church, so got my musical stuff from there, did plays there, so I always did it, but just never thought of it as a career. Not because I didn't think I could do it, it's just, my mother raised me,
That's
and I was the
not what you-
oldest, we don't have enough black doctors, don't have enough black lawyers. I love science, so I actually started college as a biology chemistry major. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon at first.
Yes.
And then, then I took an intro to psychology class,
Same.
and
Same.
Smart.
changed my
Same for me.
changed my life. If anybody knows Ronald Lewis
Yeah,
Connor
yeah.
is actor
Yeah.
here in Chicago. We're actually cousins. We went to the same high school. He's from St. Louis, Missouri. And when he graduated, I got him into theater sophomore year of high school. And when we graduated, he went to Clark Atlanta University for theater. And that was my first time thinking like, dang,
Right?
you could actually go to school for this. But I was already going to school for what I was going to school for. Fast forward, he's graduated. He's come back to St. Louis, and he starts working at the St. Louis Black Repertory Company. I'm working for American Airlines at the time. And he calls me. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "We had this jewel in St. Louis, and I'm used to getting my paycheck every 2 weeks, But I did start hanging around the theater. I met Ryan Hines, who was the
Ryan
founder and founding artistic director there, producing director, and started taking some classes with him. He put me in some readings, and he tested me singing and different things, and then I got offered the job as the production assistant. So I called American Airlines the next day and quit. And I accepted the job as the production assistant, making $200 a week, which was less than the interns were making.
Yeah.
Now, this is another thing about the black rep. This is why I say I've been fortunate, because the black rep pays their interns.
That's right.
They're acting. It's only $250 a week, but he would always remind them. But most interns, because he has a most interns don't even get paid. They do this for credit. You get a check every week. And,
Because we at the Black Rep. Yeah, I know.
So I was making less than the interns. I met Sandra Reeves Phillips. If you remember the movie Lean on Me, she was the music teacher who sang sometimes. And she did this show. She did this show called The Late Great Ladies of the Blues. That was the beginning of the season. I remember all this yesterday. And so that this show came called Nothing But the Blues. And, I'd be sweeping the stage, and I know all the songs. I kind of played the game. I knew people were listening. I knew people were around while I'm getting the screws and stuff up off the... And so one of the characters in the show took me aside and said, "Hey, run these scales." And we did all that. He was like, "Something is coming." The last show of that season was Damn Yankees, and Ryan Hines came to me. He was like, "I'm going to let you be young Joe Hardy. Now, I'm not directing this, so if the director says we got to replace you, then I'm going to have to replace you." But so that was my shot.
Right?
And that was my first professional show, and I've been going ever since. Now, after that, though, I realized I didn't go to school for this. So let me learn my craft. I joined the internship program for 3 years. But that's working in an equity. This is why I say I'm kind of fortunate and spoiled. I was working already in an equity theater. So, though where you say the things you have to do free, of course we were interns, so we're part of the touring company. You got to do that.
That's right.
You got to work the back. You got to work the main stage. You got to work the box office. You got to hang and focus lights. You got to strike and load in. You have to do all those things. Like should be 36 hours in one day. He had, he already had his choruses for the big musicals because he had this group of interns. But for me, it was a trade-off. It's like, yeah, he's using the interns, but I'm also using him. I'm getting a resume. And then the time came, so moving into equity. We were doing Othello, and I knew nothing about this. I knew nothing about the union and things at that time. Because generally theaters are not quick to explain it to you. No. They're not wanting you to move in that direction. So they generally
about
don't.
Their business, but not about your business.
Speaking in broad generalities, but in general, they're not going to divulge that information if you don't ask them.
That's right.
I knew nothing. I didn't know to ask. Anthony Peoples, actor here in Chicago, came to St. Louis to do Othello. Was in Othello, and he asked me, he was like, how long you been working? I was like, I've been the intern. I did the internship for 3 years, and now, I'm the production manager, and I'm, and this, that, and he's like, no, you're not EMC. I'm like, what is that? And he's like, nobody explained that to you? And so he took the time, and I praise Anthony Peoples to this day for dropping this on me, because this was a turning point for me mentally. Once he explained what it was, I went straight to Brian Hines, and it's like, I think I want to join the EMC program. He's like, what you know about the EMC? But then, he explained it to me. It was like, okay, go ahead, And so I joined the EMC program then and started earning my points. And I appreciate that EMC program so much for allowing you to do everything. To get your face around. Yes. So I got my equity card with Court Theater for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Now, I just did Ma Rainey's Black Bottom at Writers, but I was Sylvester, the stutterer Sylvester in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom at Court. And that's where I finally got my equity card. That was probably 2010, so I've been here 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years. But for me, I felt that I shouldn't push anything. I felt that everything up to that point, everything I felt came when and how it should. So I felt that would be the same. It would be the same thing. And what I always tell younger people who are asking questions about the union is, you got to understand that it is very, 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 very individual. Your story, your path, your journey is not going to be the next person's. So listen to the various stories, learn glean what you can from those various stories, but also understand your journey is going to be very specific to you.
That's right. That's right.
And I think you will know.
When it's time.
When it's time, I think you will know.
My journey was different than most of yours. I came to Chicago right after graduate school. And this was in the 70s, and was working as an actor, but I also landed a job teaching with city colleges, which was a great development because it helped me financially. And in the 70s, I don't think the word diversity or inclusion had been invented yet. So I auditioned around. Although my emphasis, my graduate degree was on directing, so I was doing a little bit of that, and trying to work as an actor. And I worked at 4, 5, 6 different theaters because the off-loop explosion was just happening, the storefront, and I worked at a number of those, all non-equity. All non-Latino roles, which is a good thing, but I could have been working more had there been any theater company producing Latino-centric theater. I landed a job with my first artistic directorship. I'm the artistic director at Teatro Vista, which is my 4th artistic directorship, I think. And I landed a job running a summer stock company in Michigan City, Indiana, where I used a lot of the Chicago theater people who've come out of there and stuff. And so I was getting my fill there, and I would do maybe one show as an actor on an off-loop company as a non-equity actor. I ran that company for about 10 years, and then my wife and I decided to go to Los Angeles. And I said, I haven't worked as an actor for quite a while. I started doing some movie and film here, and so I went there just to do some film and theater work. And it was all, I was still non-union at that point, and I landed another artistic directorship there, running a Latino company called Nosotros there for about 3 years. And we did well. We stayed there for about 9 years and had our son, and we wanted to raise him in Chicago, which made more sense than raising him in LA.
Yeah.
In Los Angeles, we had a house there, and we knew one neighbor across the alley to say hello, and that's it. And here we know everyone up and down the block, and it was a great place to raise our son. So we decided to stay here, and I just directed 3 shows in Los Angeles back to back to back, and our son was 2 years old. And I said, I'm going to take a year off and just teach and be with my son. That year turned into 3 years, and then I said, okay, now I need to start doing something here. And I decided I'm going to push directing aside, and I'm going to go for the acting stage. And I was very fortunate. The one and only time that I've asked to audition anywhere was with OJ. Actually, I said, "Hey, OJ, do you have anything going on?" He said, "Yeah, you know what I do." It was a show over at Steppenwolf, Jesus Hopped the A Train. Which was a great experience and all, and I ended up getting my. Then I did a show at the Goodman, and I said, I need to go equity now. I hadn't even looked at the hours. I wasn't.
Right.
I need to go equity now. It was just like me. I need to do it now, and that's where I got my equity card. I never really did have that issue of should I go or should I not stay non-equity or not and stuff, and it worked out well for me. Like you said, everyone has their own.
That's right.
Yeah.
Evan,
Oh, well.
your journey
my
into
journey.
the equity world.
It was.
6 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yesterday. No.
Kid, I love you.
That's all right. No, it was actually really interesting for me because I lived in New York for a few years after college, just trying to, like Mark said, be in a chorus of some sort, and got to the point that I realized that final callbacks had become my profession. I was taking so much time off of work to go to these final callbacks and stay all day, and then as a non-equity actor in New York, not get the job. I got so frustrated that I quit theater completely. So for 3 years, there was no thought of theater in my mind, and then I visited someone here in Chicago and saw a storefront production and was like, this is incredible. And they're paying you to do this. They're not paying you a lot, but you are non-equity and you're getting paid to do something that I would love to do that has far more meaning than the tables that I'm waiting. So I moved from New York to Chicago thinking that I could at least start in the non-equity world, and had kind of the fortune and misfortune of getting cast a lot in non-equity theater in these really fantastic roles. But after a year or two of doing it, I realized that a lot of these theaters seem to be taking advantage of the fact that they could find a really fantastic leading performer for almost no money. So, like the first show that I did with Kelvin would not have known my name, I don't think, honestly, because I was a walking clothes hanger in an equity production. And I was fine with it for a while, because I knew that I was getting a chance to work in an equity house, and I was getting a weekly paycheck, and I didn't have to be the person carrying a lot of the load in the show and waiting for my $150 stipend 6 weeks later. So I had the weird journey of coming into non-equity theater and fighting to be an equity actor, but having so many theaters not only discourage me kind of from wanting to turn, because you may never work again.
You may never work again, right?
You may never work again.
Not that many equity houses in the city.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
Or they would send me down the road of, oh, well, it really is a tough transition because you've built a name for yourself as such a great non-equity actor. It will take us years
to transition from thinking of you as a non-equity actor to thinking of you as an equity actor, which is nonsense. It's nonsense.
It's not.
It's absolute
business model on you.
exactly.
Which is
It's
amazing to me. I mean,
absolute
that's the thing I tell people all the
nonsense.
time. Don't listen to half of that. I mean,
Yeah.
listen to as much of
Yeah.
that as you need to. That's all about them as
Yeah.
nothing to do with your
So-
And they don't have that mentality of thinking that when they say you won't work again, that cannot be true because there are other people coming up
That's exactly
that will
right.
be
Yes.
in
That's
that
exactly
pioneer
right.
Yes.
stage
Exactly.
that
Yes.
they will love and that will work.
Yes,
Yeah.
and somebody that was very dear to me at the time said something very interesting that said, "What makes you think that if they want you now, they will not want you later?
Right.
They want you, no matter what the
Regardless of
price.
the status.
No matter what the price, they want you. They're just going to have to deal with the fact that you cost more at some point." But after that, like, things opened up for me in a way that they had never opened up before because I trusted my gut and said, look, these people wanted you before. Then they realized that they had to pay for you
Right.
and still said, look, it's going to cost us more, but we really do need you to play this role. If you're not willing, that's fine.
But there's also more people see you, so more
Yeah.
people are interested. It's like that.
Yeah.
So that model is
Yeah.
it's patently false. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
So all of
Yeah.
a sudden, your profile is larger.
Yes, it
you
puts
know?
you. They try to put you in a very specific place, and because you've never been to the other side of that field,
You just don't have any idea.
You don't have the outlook to be able to say,
You know,
that's
go-
all false.
Going from non-equity to my first contract was a Lord D at Milwaukee Rep, and I was like, "What am I?
Yeah.
What are you doing?" You know, and I stayed for a season. I kept getting canceled, so I was there for 3 shows. All of a sudden, from going from waiting tables and in a dream
Yeah.
to all of a sudden they put me up and they made sure that I had
You got vacation pay weeks.
per diem and I could all of that sort of stuff and and it was like I never looked back but that fear that they talk about is always there when you especially I'm a callback kid myself. It took me 33 auditions at the Goodman and like probably 4 final callbacks before I was ever cast in a show there. And that was a show that I had been in the workshop for a couple of years. But I was winning.
Oh, I want to cover so many topics, and we will, but because this is also so personal for me, I have to ask, in terms of the non-equity equity realm, you probably, at least I have so many friends that are dodging points, ignoring the EMC sheets, not wanting to turn, and then I have lots of friends that do turn and never work again. If I'm being honest, a lot of them are female. Do you have any advice or thoughts on those people that are so against joining equity or so fearful of joining equity because this is such a starry non-equity town, and they think, well, I can't be equity here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say I watched the first episode of this that Ife was on, and one of the things she said was Chicago didn't want her until she didn't want Chicago.
Yeah.
The power of no, too, or the power of
You were saying that already. Yeah, that's real.
You once you decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do, you have to figure out how to do it. And normally how to do, and it's by any means necessary. And Chicago is a great town, great theater town, but they are not the only ones.
Right.
So you can make your living. You can make your living, and this is your hub. They will see you eventually, but I say don't wait on Chicago to throw you something, and don't allow that to be your hold you back from wanting to go.
That can't be your end all
that
and
can't
be
be.
all.
Yeah,
It can't.
if you want to go equity, work for it and work it.
Tracking like this in regional theaters and taking work where you can is something that normally needs to happen very early on in your career, depending on what your aspirations
That's
are.
right.
Because
That's right.
if your
That's right.
aspiration is to settle and to have a family and that kind of stuff, that regional jump, hopping from buses to buses is not going to last.
It's
that
tough,
long.
right? It's tough.
You can't parlay that and parlay certain dreams that you have if
right.
you're family tied and stuff. So that has to happen. It has to happen early.
Absolutely.
But that's what I was saying. Be aware of yourself and what you want for your career.
And what you're able to do at
Right.
whatever point that is. That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
Something I have said, and perhaps this is too self-deprecating, but maybe you can relate, is I have absolutely said, well, when people are like, oh, you work all the time, and it's like, oh, thanks. Something that I've commonly said is, well, it's a lot easier for men. Have you ever thought that?
Unfortunately, that's been the case,
too,
and it's
is it?
still the case. But as you pointed out, it's changing. We have one of your previous guests, I think, Harmony, who started Firebrand, which is musicals. It has to have predominantly women.
And it came out of her seeing a need.
Yes.
Right. Rivendell, which is centered on,
Absolutely.
on female roles and female writers, and more of that is happening. But and I know that the funders of the grants are now checking
That's right.
and asking, all right, let's see your demographic hiring.
Right.
And so the women have to be
yeah.
represented as much as the
People change with money.
the transgender people, that the Latinos,
That's right.
the Asians, and so on. And that's a good thing. Whether it's moving fast enough, probably not. None of the movements are, but at least they're rolling, and we have to do our job.
And you have
to keep it rolling as
more
well.
people of more diversity in the lead positions, in artistic directorships, and in casting directorships in the theater, and that so people. It's not like you're an outsider because you're other or different or ethnic.
Something that I wanted to talk about. In June of 2016, the Chicago Reader published an article about the long-standing abuse taking place at the former Profiles Theater, which we mentioned. Killer Joe happened there, and thus #NotInOurHouse and the Chicago Theater Standards was born. With this and the Me Too movement, how has bearing witness to these stories impacted you? Has it changed your relationship to fellow actors? Wow. Kareem?
I mean, is it egregiously wrong for me to say no? I just think that these things have always been standard. I think about all the things that need to be told to people, mainly to men, mainly to cis, you know what I mean? And hetero men, I just kind of feel like, why doesn't this come with the programming? Do you know what I mean? I have several friends who had been caught up in some of the things that were going on at Profiles, and just kind of hearing those stories, my jaw hits the floor. I'm so glad that this initiative took place. I feel like I only think why did it take so long? And I guess that's fear. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The moment you start valuing yourself as an actor and as a community, as a group of people that are doing this kind of work, people don't have power over you anymore.
Is everyone familiar with the initiative? Do you mind explaining a little bit what the initiative is the Not in Our House the Chicago Theater Standards?
Well, I think it was born, maybe y'all know more about this than me, but I think it was born out of some of the abuses that were going on at Profile, some of the lines that were being crossed in rehearsal, in things that people were being asked to do, in the psychological games that were being played, mostly against female identifying folks, do you know what I mean? And I think after years and years of this, and stories being passed back and forth, that's the thing I think that probably helped, is communication, talking about these things, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then again, you get somebody in a vulnerable position that relies on these producers for work.
Yeah.
Then
that's right.
you the dilemma of whether to speak about up or not. So there was a network of women that were talking to each other for a long time before anybody came forward, you know, and that's what I found most interesting. And then it was just about everybody I knew. And I've been at this for a very long time, but it was somebody from every generation that I've worked with over the last 35, 40 years. It was always just about everybody I know. And I know has every woman I know, every woman identifying person I know has experience on some level or another with somebody in power, because that's what it boils down to. And these, you know, especially on the non-equity level, with these kids coming out of school and like moving to a strange place and all that sort of stuff. And again, somebody else has control over your fate because you have to go and audition for a job every time another one ends. You know what I mean? So the cycle continues.
That is a part of it. Everybody kind of suffers in silence with things like this, thinking that not only that it's something that you personally did, but that it is something that's just widely accepted as a part of being in the entertainment industry, and that while being again grossly false as to what it should be. I don't understand why we haven't been speaking about this more often, because that is where we find our protection. That's where we find you can find strength in.
I think part of that why we haven't been, and part of that, I mean, that the whole idea of being low, low in the hierarchy as an actor, I think it's a systemic thing. I think the one thing that I can say is probably still in some ways broken about what we do is we have these positions, right? Mm-hmm. And we seem to think that one is more valuable than another. True. Yeah. And in reality, what we're doing is we're collaborating. Absolutely. None of it can get done without either one of us.
That's exactly right.
Without any single one of us. And so I think that puts everybody on the same level as collaborators. Mm-hmm. I often wonder why actors aren't invited to, for example, design discussions, especially around costumes, because it's personal. You're going to be donning it. Yeah. That aside, I think what I'm saying is like we all make this together, and we all need each other, and so I think it necessitates respect.
Absolutely.
Human respect.
And I always think about in the nonprofit world, there is no such thing as power. We are all doing this for some sort of greater good. You know what I mean? You cannot get rich doing doing equity theater in nonprofit companies. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so there is that love of it. There is the collaboration. There is us against them mentality. And so when somebody that is a part of that collective takes advantage of somebody else, it's egregious, and it affects us all. And I am closer to women, the same situation you're talking about, Marcus, is because they're able to start talking about it now. I was at this theater and this happened, and this person did this to me, they just would like keep their heads down and try to do the work and not and not make waves. And I always talk about my kids. It's like we in life we keep our heads down. We try to you want to do well on test scores. You want to stay out of trouble. But in theater, that is when you confront all that stuff. We are bearing our emotions and opening ourselves up, and then to have them have to walk around with this burden that these people that they are collaborating with are putting on them because they think they have some sort of a power over them is disgusting to me, and it makes me sad that they had to do it for so long.
You're right, and I think that in order to go to those places that people in other professions don't have to go through. What it requires is a level of trust.
That's right. That's right.
You know what I mean?
From the first day.
Like of complete trust, and you cannot abuse that. Otherwise, you can't tell the stories that we're aiming to tell.
That's exactly
we are humans paid to live as other humans on stage, and humanity has been left out of this profession.
Isn't that interesting?
For
so long.
And generally, if you look at other things, it takes generally some type of somebody speaking, a revolution, if you will,
Yeah.
to make people aware of the humanity. Unfortunately, you have to make people aware that they're being inhuman sometimes. It sounds stupid, but
But it's the
sometimes
truth,
you
and
do.
they-
You
but
have to
they
make
also-
them aware.
but they
Live in their stations.
right.
They live in their particular. It's still, they still have, not even in not-for-profits, they still have power positions.
Yeah.
And in this industry, we've always been told this is the person who has your fate, your life in their hands. And they feel themselves. And in that feel that they can do. And speaking as a cis male, it's embarrassing because we generally get all looped in the same group.
Right.
So you're embarrassing me. And now when I'm on stage with this lady, sometimes I'm nervous.
Right.
I'm nervous
Sure.
about trying things. I'm nervous about now personally, I always have a conversation with them. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
We say this all the time, but we don't live by it. Communication.
Communication is key.
Communication.
Sure. It's
You
much better.
have to talk to the people that you're with. How do you establish trust if you're not talking? But it's the abuses of these things that tends to me to trickle over into those who are not, and then it makes us nervous about doing our job. So I applaud any for lack of a better word, revolution.
Yeah,
because,
for sure.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes it takes a punch in the gut for people to
And
realize.
so we have the
what they're
rise
doing.
of intimacy choreographers. And
Exactly.
directors and
I
those sorts
just
of
did a
things.
major project with 18 young performers, and I'll tell you, the people who learned from it the most were the people who had been in the business for a long time.
Yes.
And we were just having the conversation. You guys, this is what it is now. We did a lot of exercises, and I loved it. Of course, it was so helpful. But it was even going so far as. And our show had violence, and actually was very necessary. There was a lot of violence and a lot of shared space going on. So it was important. It's always important, but in particular because of the events in our show.
Yeah.
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom at Writers was my first time.
Was the
with
first time.
Intimacy.
Yeah.
choir.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Changes the game.
Yeah.
Right?
It does change the game,
Yeah.
because we're all having, again, we're having conversation about it now, and sometimes it was even getting past the conversation. Somebody that you know well saying, "Okay, we're going to have this conversation now.
Yeah.
I know that you know me, we know each other, but we're still going to have this
That's
conversation."
exactly right.
Yeah, well, I think it is to our benefit now that more people, men, women, cisgender or not, feel that they are the conversation is available to them. Because for so long, like I remember my mom saying, there are certain things that black women don't complain about. We just won't. We just won't say it.
Right.
It is because the way that our complaints will be received is not necessarily the way that our complaints are delivered. So we just have to keep. There are some things that we just keep to ourselves and we fight through.
Keep your head down.
Yes,
It's like,
exactly.
keep moving forward,
So and I think it is so important that men, as a part of this conversation, continue to say, no. This conversation has to be had and is important. Because for so long, these people, because for so long, these people felt like they couldn't speak. And now I am speaking for them, and they're going to speak. There has to be fight on both sides of it. And now we've kind of come more to the side where the people that don't necessarily experience some of these things take more of the responsibility for bringing these things to light.
I think there's a lesson in there for any relationship dynamic, and that I think it's on the person with the power or perceived power to be more responsible and to recognize that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And acknowledge it.
Because the other side of that, on the other side of that coin is silence and fear, and not that anyone is not capable of speaking for themselves, but in such situations, whatever it may be, whether it's in this situation or I don't know, an analog to that. It's on the person with the power to be conscious and to not abuse it, and to remember, for all of us to remember that we are all going to die one day.
Yeah.
And B, we all do kind of the same things. Like we go to the bathroom, we sleep.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean, like we're all people.
Yeah. It's in a sense, it's like this issue has come out of the closet, I guess.
Absolutely.
Because I was aware that there were some incidents, and obviously aware that women are mistreated and catcalling down the street, and not even in theater and all. But I wasn't aware of what was going on in profiles until it broke. And it's a good slap in the face for me because, like I said, well, it probably goes on a bit here and there or whatever. But I didn't know that it was quite as demonstrative as it was at profiles, and as prevalent as it seemed to be.
Because
so in that
profiles
sense,
is
it's
so
out
much
and it's
more.
released, and everyone's talking about it. And like you're saying, communication is the best thing. It is a little daunting to everyone because you have to be extra careful now, but that's all good. That's good stuff. That's good. So you said I direct as well as act and all, and the past says no. What you need to do is go over here and just whatever. If I'm on the stages, but no, just counter cross left or whatever. But now it's. Do you mind if I touch you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
permission.
is the kind of embrace. This is the kind of whatever
Yeah.
As a demonstration, and that's all good. That's all good because everyone needs to be aware of what is a violation and what is acceptable. And
it's the
can't
if
know
it's in
that
your if it's in your
unless it's
conscious
discussed.
if it's in your conscious mind, then you're always actively working against it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the thing about that you're talking about, Evan. Is like I am going to be an advocate for it all the time. I'm gonna make sure, and I'm not in any position of power, but I will not let anybody be mistreated around me, and I don't care who it is. You know, I've checked enough boxes of my own, for marginalization as it is. But so I just figured like everybody should get the same fair shake, and it drives me nuts. Going back to that thing about less roles for women. How the hell is that possible? They're more than half of the population, and so you figure who are the people that are still running this industry that are allowed to make that happen.
Well, that's also about who's telling the stories.
That's
and,
right.
And how are the stories being told?
That's right. Yeah.
And you're right. That is it. Again, we're getting back to the business of theater because sometimes that when somebody creates a season, we talk about this all the time behind union tables. I mean, the stuff that we hope to achieve and through committee work in steps, but you can't ask a theater to do this season. You can't ask them to create that kind of season. But the more we talk about it, the more you realize, no, that you're not. That's not the story that needs to be told right now.
Right. Exactly.
Kareem, were you going to say something earlier regarding equity? Did that moment pass?
Oh, it probably did, but it did strike me because I'm always thinking about these things that we're all male identifying folks, right? That we're a bunch of male identifying folks talking about not in our house and me too. It just seems just seems a little bit like
Yeah.
Right?
I hear you.
No, it's true.
and then I want to turn left.
Well, it impacts all. It impacts
It does. It's just it's not a thing that's I think that's right. I don't think it's a thing that's taboo for us to talk about, but there's still a part of me that wishes like that in this group there were
They were represented.
some female identifying voices to have a larger discussion.
Pushing more of the conversation of us being like advocates
Yeah.
to the situation. Yeah.
That's what I'm going for.
I wrote the question. Yeah, well, they wrote the question.
No, I appreciate it, but you also come to the very core of, of what we do in this business. I think we should never have real big conversations without everybody in the room. And you're right.
That's fair.
I look around our table and I feel we're all so different. I mean, and yes, the gender is the one thing, and the identifying gender is the one thing, but I think that's about it.
want to make sure that we get to, in this all ties in, is Ricardo being artistic director at Teatro Vista. Which,
Honored at the
and
Jefferson.
Ricardo, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Teatro Vista, why was it started? Why was Teatro Vista born in, I think, 1990?
This is our 30th year, so yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd mentioned when I got to the city, there were no roles, there were no theaters. When I went to Los Angeles and did our 9 years there, that's when Teatro Vista was formed during that time period by Henry Godinez and Eddie Torres. And they had just gotten frustrated with the frustration that I had earlier on about, gosh, there are no Latino scripts, and whatever roles are given are perfunctory. And we need to take it into our own hands, which is the mantra that every actor should have. I need to take the power into my own hands and do what I can. And that's why we started to tell Latino stories with Latino actors. And that's what we do. As a producer and artistic director, executive artistic director, I look for scripts that, of course, will speak to our actors, to our community, to our audience. And as an ensemble, they get first crack at those particular roles. But we also have productions that involve non-Latino individuals. And so that's when we can open up and look at the rest of the acting community. So it's a different kind of situation. Well, why are they all Latinos in those roles? Where's the black representation? Where's the white representation? Well, it's a specific story,
everywhere
with a
else.
specific character that is needed. And you have to speak Spanish and sound like it. So we're covered from that end as to why are just Latinos in your shows? So it's a different kind of ballgame.
I say this all the time, but I truly mean it. We could easily talk for another, I think, couple hours. And I would love to, but I think that's all the time we have. And again, I can't thank all of you enough. This has been really delightful and enlightening, and thank you again. That's all. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.